George was a good son. He really was, 27 years old and sharp as a tack. He had a good head on his shoulders. But sometimes George felt like that head was stuck underneath his mama's wing. She meant well, he knew that. It was just a bit much. Every hour on the dot, his phone would buzz when he was out with friends.
Georgie, you all right? You need anything? Don't stay out too late.
He loved his mama. He truly did. But sometimes George just wanted to breathe. He wanted to be a man, make his own choices, even mess up a little. Wasn't that part of life? He longed for the freedom his older brother John seemed to have effortlessly. It wasn't just the hourly calls. Oh no, it was a whole lot more. Every time his phone buzzed, it was like a reminder that he was never truly alone. His mother's presence was a constant, hovering over him like a shadow he couldn't shake off. Job interviews. Mama had opinions on those. She had a checklist longer than his resume, and she made sure he knew every single point on it.
Now, Georgie, make sure you wear that nice sweater I got you. And sit up straight. Don't forget to mention how you helped that old lady cross the street. Shows you got a good heart. And remember, eye contact is key.
He loved his mama, he really did. But sometimes a man just wanted to go on a job interview without feeling like he was 10 years old again. He wanted to prove he could stand on his own 2 feet without the constant reminders of his childhood. And then there was the matter of moving out. He'd tried to bring it up a couple of times. Just the thought of it sent his mama into a tizzy. It was as if the very idea of him leaving was an affront to her existence.
Move out? Who's gonna cook for you? Who's gonna make sure you're eating your vegetables? You'll starve, Georgie. You'll waste away. And who will remind you to take your vitamins?
The words tumbled out of her mouth like a runaway train. There was no stopping her once she got started. George loved his mama, but sometimes he felt like he was suffocating. The love was there, but so was the overwhelming sense of being smothered by her constant care and concern. John. Now, John was a different story. 2 years older than George, John had his own place, a nice little house with a porch swing and everything. He had a girlfriend too, a lovely woman named Sarah. They were always laughing and going on adventures. George loved his brother, he really did, but sometimes he couldn't help but feel a pang of envy.
John's life seemed so easy, so free. He never got the hourly calls, the worried clucking, the constant hovering. Their mama treated him like a grown man.
It wasn't that George resented John, not really. It was just that he yearned for that same level of respect, that same assumption of capability. He was 27, for goodness sake. Didn't that count for something? Section 4, a glimmer of hope named Holly. And then there was Holly. Holly, with her bright smile and eyes that sparkled like the ocean on a sunny day. Her presence was like a breath of fresh air, a beacon of light in the mundane routine of everyday life. She worked at the bookstore downtown, the one with the big comfy chairs and the smell of old paper and dreams. It was a place where stories came alive, and Holly was the heart of it.
I loved books, and I loved talking to Holly about them even more. Our conversations were like a dance, each word a step closer to understanding each other. I loved the way her nose crinkled when she laughed at my jokes. It was a small, endearing quirk that made my heart flutter every time. I loved the way she listened, really listened, when I talked. It was as if my words were the most important thing in the world to her.
But there was a problem, a big mama-shaped problem, a shadow that loomed over our budding relationship. See, Holly had met his mother. It hadn't gone well. The tension was palpable and the air was thick with unspoken words.
Georgie, honey, are you sure about this one? She seems a little much. Her words were like daggers piercing through the fragile hope I had.
His mama's words, laced with disapproval, echoed in his ears. They were hard to ignore, hard to forget. Holly, to her credit, had been polite. She had handled the situation with grace and poise, but George could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. It was a flicker, a moment of uncertainty that he couldn't shake off.
It's just, my mom is a little protective. He tried to explain, but the words felt inadequate.
He'd stammered, feeling his cheeks burn. The embarrassment was almost too much to bear.
It's okay, I understand. Her voice was soft, reassuring, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes.
But did she? Did she really? The question lingered, a silent echo in the quiet moments that followed. Section 5, finding his voice. George looked at his reflection in the mirror. He barely recognized himself. The man staring back at him seemed like a stranger, a shadow of who he once was. Where was the confident, capable man he knew he could be? It was time. Time to reclaim his identity, to rediscover his strength. Time to stop being Georgie and start being George. The George who faced challenges head-on, who didn't shy away from his dreams.
I love my mama, I really do. She's been my rock, my constant support. But I love Holly too. Holly, who sees me for who I am, who believes in my potential. And I deserve a chance at happiness, a chance to pursue my own dreams. A chance to build a life with someone who sees me, all of me, who understands my journey. Not just the mama's boy I've allowed myself to become. It's time to fly, to break free from the chains of my past.
He took a deep breath and walked out the door, leaving behind the comfort and familiarity of his childhood home. It was a bittersweet moment. He had a one-way ticket to, well, he wasn't quite sure yet. The destination was unknown, but the journey was necessary. But for the first time in his life, George felt truly free. Free to explore, to discover, to be himself. He had a phone call to make, but it wasn't to his mama. It was to Holly. He needed to share his newfound freedom with her. He had a lot to tell her about his dreams, his fears, and his hopes for their future together. He had a life to live, a life full of possibilities, adventures, and love. George and Holly sat at the kitchen table, a map of Germany spread out before them. They were excitedly discussing their plans for a 2-week holiday, a trip that symbolized more than just a vacation. For George, it was a step toward a life he had always dreamed of, a life with Holly by his side, experiencing the world together. But not everyone shared their enthusiasm. George's mum, standing in the doorway, watched them with a frown. She couldn't hide her disapproval.
George, honey, she began, her voice tinged with concern. Do you really think you can manage without me? What if something goes wrong? You know how much you rely on me.
George looked up, his eyes meeting his mother's. He could see the worry etched on her face, but he also felt a surge of determination.
Mom, I appreciate everything you've done for me, he said gently, but firmly. But I need to do this. I need to prove to myself that I can handle things on my own. Holly and I have planned this trip for months. It's important to us.
His mother's eyes filled with tears.
But what if you can't? What if you get lost or something happens? I won't be there to help you.
Holly reached over and took George's hand, squeezing it reassuringly.
We'll be fine, Mrs. Thompson. We've done our research and we're prepared. George is more capable than you think.
George's mom shook her head, her expression a mix of fear and sadness.
I just don't want to see you get hurt.
George stood up and walked over to his mother, wrapping her in a hug. I know, Mom, but I need to take this step. For myself and for Holly. Trust me, I'll be okay.
As George and Holly continued to finalize their plans, George's mum watched them with a heavy heart. She knew she had to let go, but it wasn't easy. She had always been his protector, his guide. Now she had to trust that he could navigate the world on his own. It was a test of resolve for both George and his mother, a test that would ultimately strengthen their bond, even as it set George free to chase his dreams. The scene ended with George and Holly sharing a triumphant smile, ready to embark on their adventure as George's mum slowly nodded, accepting that it was time for her son to spread his wings. Pause 3S, Section 6, The Test of Resolve.